through what I call the three rings. I have three rings here. As to how God, where Jesus says that he would count us worthy. And it was an interesting thing because the first group that I mentioned was this group here. And he says, unless you love me more than you love these others, you're really not worthy of me. So when I got to thinking about that, I think of how many people who in families don't really like each other. Then there's a family here. This family, they love each other. But they're not here. And so in order for Christ to manifest himself, he says, you must love me more than any of these. And as I reflect on that, when I look at this group, what is so astounding is there's so many in families that don't like each other. Just think about that. When he said, you have to love these more than me, and we look at all the families that are getting a divorce and so on and so forth, and somewhere along the line, you can't tell me that people who can't love who they can see can't love who they can't see. So that puts me immediately in trouble. Then when it says in John chapter 14, verse 21, Jesus said, I will manifest myself to you, and the Father and I will come and we'll make our abode with you and we'll manifest ourselves in you. In order for him to manifest himself in me, I have to have, he says, if you love me, the only thing he says attached to that, he says, if you love me, he says, just do what I tell you. So, for example, for Christ to manifest, to make me worthy, for me to be worthy before Christ, I have to love him, number one. Now, I took my own heart, and that led me to something else. But in order to be worthy, in order for him to manifest himself through me, then we went to another level. We happened to be discussing this. John, you were there. We brought up the subject of the heart. Now, what we want to do, we have a desire in our church to see somebody go from where they are to where God would like them to be. That all sounds well and good. But if I begin to take the analysis, in fact, Tim and I talked about it. I said, Tim, let me ask you a question Wednesday morning. I said, do you love Christ more than Danita? And it was kind of like letting some air out. However, it drives you back into the perspective of where it has to go, and I hope I'm getting to a point. Then the next thing that had to happen, in order for me to get somebody from here to here, it says in 139 Psalm, nobody can teach you how to get from here to here. Now, if I went back to my circles, it says, first of all, starting up here, you must have a searchable heart. Search me and try me and see if there be any wicked way. I can't tell you all the problems you have, and because none of us are honest in our self-appraisal, you can't either. So I have to take the Lord, myself before the Lord for this searchable heart. When I move from the searchable heart, I now have to have a trusting heart. Now, a trusting heart, if we ask everybody this morning in the church how many trust the Lord, you think every hand will go up probably? Let's see. However, when I get to the trusting heart, it's a heart that has been dealt with unbelief. You see, it isn't a matter of whether I trust events or so. When I get down here, the third one has to be a broken heart. Now, the broken heart isn't a heart that grieves over the loss of a loved one. The broken heart is a heart that has had all the walls, fortresses, and entrenchments destroyed. If I don't go here, I can't get here. So I can't get you on this course until you would really follow this process. And so I get down here, see if all the strongholds are broken. And all of us have strongholds. Now, one of the evidence of that is, if there's tension that you experience in your home with family members, if there's anger and there's resentment, if there is fear, you're not here, you see. Those are all warnings and evidences that you've got to get back in this process, because all of these things are causing an interesting phenomena, and you can find it in 2 Timothy chapter 2.
Fred,
Go ahead.
Aren't there degrees
Of what?
of a searchable heart, a trusting heart, and a broken heart?
Absolutely.
Can I make a comment on that?
Yeah, but rather
Sure,
than
go ahead.
one excluding the other,
I heard
Go
a
ahead.
message a number of years ago. I guess it would kind of fall in line with the broken heart. It was about the parable of the soils, because you go through, you know, the sower was scattering seed, and the seed fell on rocky ground and good soil and just different conditions. And he was using that application of the heart and how different elements that we have and how we approach are from our heart standpoint, like you were talking about. Are there different degrees? Absolutely. And I thought it made a lot of sense in his message. These certain things, we talked about healing a number of months ago, and everybody, that caused some, everybody had some different ideas about that. And again, how our heart attitude is going to be how God can work through that.
Yeah.
So it could be stony ground. So if in that particular instance, if your heart is really cold to that, it's stony ground. God's not going to be able to do anything in that element until that happens.
Well, for example, we all have to realize that what we've been doing, we've been covering this for 5 weeks. And so there's a lot of background. What I'm doing is doing a little review because there are degrees. For example, I'll give you an example of that. I went to Rotary about a month and a half ago. Guy tapped me on the shoulder as I'm getting ready to leave. He said, I was in the internet, I saw your webpage, and I frankly saw my tract and read it. He's from Venezuela, he's an architect. So I said after that, I went into an explanation of how it wasn't religion, went through the drill, and I said, could you do that? He said, yes, I could do that. Then I sent him, because he prayed, I sent a little note, and I sent him a little book, Now That I Believe. Thursday I had lunch with him. Now it's the first time I'm sitting down with him, where we're not just passing each other, how you doing? I'm going to listen to the guy's heart. Now he begins to tell me some background of what is getting his attention on this, because his brother's in Venezuela, he's an engineer, and he's dying of cancer. Whoa. Now it begins to give me a perspective. Now I can't get with him on this matter of a broken heart and strongholds. He's having a broken heart over the loss of his brother. However, because his heart is soft, I can begin to talk with him and begin to bring him an exploration of things he's never even considered. But I'm listening to that guy's heart now. It's giving me some insights as to how I can pray for that guy and have a relationship with him. Gave him a second book. See, now I begin to ask him about evidences, and he begins to let me know that his appetite is being whetted. I spent a session on this, I'm sure you remember, how as we move through this process, God today, because if we're going to have great tribulation, it's going to need great comforters. If I don't go through this process to get to this point, we will never be a church of great comforters. Now, you were here in our prayer this morning. Because ultimately, what I want, great comforters, going through this process with hearts that are oriented to Christ, I take my heart constantly before the Lord. I was with 4 men yesterday, and we had a long conversation about things, and they say they never considered these things, and I know that, of what we were talking about. But you begin to orient people on what God has to do to get the type of things we're talking about. I can't tell you and teach you what a broken heart. However, as I search my own heart, what I look for one thing in my own heart. This is the first thing I look for, is hardness. Who do I express, not by verbally or inference, but who do I express hardness of heart toward when their name comes up or some out of past references? If I do, I've got to go right back here and begin to work at this level. Why? Because God has raised something, I now have to deal with it, we're not going any further, you see. If I have that situation, I can never be a great comforter. So as we move toward times of great tribulation, God says I've got to raise up great comforters. And so, got to work in the heart. No, I had that luncheon with that guy Wednesday. Friday. Marshall, when were we over at, I saw you and Mike. Was that Friday at Waterloo?
Thursday.
Thursday. I had lunch with this fellow's father. Now his son is a sexual predator who has made the papers. As he made the papers in the context of his next door neighbor came into his house and threatened to kill him. Maybe you read that. His neighbor is now in a jug because he came into this lad's house, opened the door, walked in, and was not permitted to come in. He broke in and threatened he'd kill him. Now, this he's not a youngster. He's probably 35 or 40. I want to get with him because I want to go through the process of seeing what's on his mind. He's a born again believer. For example, he tells me the story. He says when they put me in jail, he said they put me in with a number 3 white supremacist. It was in the city in Ohio. He said they knew what they were doing. I said, were you ever violated in prison? No. He said, I'll tell you why. Ultimately, this hard-nosed tattooed guy, he led him to Christ. And this tattooed guy then said, he said, I don't know why I don't kill you. Why? Because God has a reason why he's in there. Why he's going through what he's going through. It's a terrible thing. He's listed as a sexual predator for 11 years. They've now passed a new bill in the state legislature that makes it retroactive for 25 years. So he's got this thing called a stigma. Now I listened to him tell this story about this. And I asked him, I said, because if I can help him, I want to help him. I said, do you think about suicide? He said, yes, I do. I said, I'll take you down the avenue as a believer when you got involved with that. That when you arrived at having committed those acts, when you prayed to receive Christ, you got rid of that one, that devil that was working on you. He came back and brought 7 others. Some of you have heard me mention this before. I said, when you get down to suicide, you're at the 8th level, and here you're hearing the big one called dread. Anytime that this is a suicide in the mind, and if somebody goes that low, he begins to hear in his mind the exit strategy. If you commit, you get out of this, you get some peace. All you have to do is take a little step here and it's over and you're free of this. He said, definitely. I fight this all the time. So I shared with some other things with him. When I looked at that boy, I got a brand new outlook on sexual predators. Now, you know why? One of the strongholds that builds up in me is my resentment of his behavior. See? It doesn't condone anything he's done. He served his time in jail. He should have, and all of that. But there are resentments that I carry toward that. You know what? I love that kid. Interestingly enough, we go through this process. Two things that we have today. We have rules without love, and we have religion without. Wow. I got to sit and listen to this boy. Right here, God does something. Because I asked him, I called him, I had lunch with he and his dad. You know what he tells me? He's got a terrible problem in our family right now. I said, what's the terrible problem? And he dropped his head. He said, it was my brother that abused me when I was young. I just told my parents. And my brother has said it wasn't true. Ooh, people have these big problems. Now, I can't go into that house because these people are believers. What level would they be at when I talk about the broken heart? Over here, the searchable heart. Here, the trusting heart. Here, the broken heart. When I go back over here, how Jesus makes me worthy. And number 2, how he manifests himself through me. John 14:21 says, if you do these things, if you do what I tell you, the Father and I, we're going to come and manifest ourselves through you. Interesting observation. Now, working with this group, it's going to be step by step. Let's see, what was it? I don't know. Monday I had a Bible study over at Copley Place. One lady showed up, just one. Her name is Irene. And we had a great conversation. And the events wouldn't have happened if anybody else would have been there. So she begins to open her heart. You know what? As we go by, she begins to let me in. She begins to let her hair down. She begins to tell me about, she's my age. Of course, neither one of us looking, of course. And so she starts telling me, you know what? When people get old, I had an aunt. My kids are not old enough or too young to remember her. She was Aunt Sadie. You know what people, she used to sit in a chair and she would sit down, and when I'd sit down, she'd start to talk to me. She'd always talk to me about the people, the popes in Schenectady, New York. Knew them by heart. She lived in Schenectady. You know what? It was the only place that my aunt ever enjoyed herself. It says we spend our years as tale is told, so when people get old, they look back over their shoulder. And then you got to indulge them. I could see it coming. I was always trying to make a way to get out of that because old Aunt Sadie was going right back to Schenectady and she's going to take me with her, and it's going to take all afternoon to hear that for the 50th time. In fact, if she wouldn't say anything, I could tell her the story. But she went back and told me some things and so on and so forth, and so we recently moved now to her Methodist background, and sent her daughter that goes to the chapel, and knows she doesn't know Christ, but yes, she'd like to. See? Heart. God just worked in opening that heart. It was fantastic. Why? Because He is love. Now, this morning we had prayer here about how cold it was, didn't we? Mm-hmm. If you go, if I can find it, I'm not, and what I did, I didn't. Just bear with me a minute. Oh, yes. Oh, thank heaven. Job 40. Job 40. Ah, yes. Thank heaven I scrambled my notes. God addresses monsters. And here you get the first one. Behold, Behemoth.
What verse are you on?
Verse 15. It says, behold, Behemoth. That's a big dude. This is a tough one to wrestle with. The other one, I got to look it up because I didn't remember. The other one will be in chapter 41. Oh boy. And
Was that one?
I'm sorry,
The one about the crocodile?
Job 41:1 is
Leviathan?
Leviathan.
The
That's,
last one.
that's the first, 41 verse 1.
Mm-hmm. Those are the two that are mentioned by name. This one's fierce. This one has sharp teeth. This one's just big and huge. So when I begin to deal with these monsters, I want to mention to you out of our prayer meeting, there were a group of people this morning dealing with a terrible, and for example, the crocodile is the only animal in the world that never grants mercy. When you get in his gun sights, you become his meal. Alligators don't do that. Nothing is more vicious than a crocodile. And he's got sharp teeth. This morning, in our prayer time, we prayed, or there was prayer for the church this morning, that because of the cold weather, that God would bring the people out and they wouldn't stay in the warmth of their houses and so on. And I'm thinking, you know what, there's at least one church in Akron's not going to have any problem, and everybody's going to try to get in it. It's the Haven of Rest. You know what the cold is doing down there at the Haven? Driving all those peoples out of the bridge to find some place where it's warm. And I'll tell you another thing about them. When they get there, they're not going to be in a hurry to leave. You know why? Those people are fighting this one. With them, what they're fighting is really wicked, vicious, no mercy at all. Teeth so sharp that it could devour them. And when they get there, you know what? They're not going to want to leave. Start thinking. Last night I want to tell you what I heard on the radio. Yeah, listen to the radio. I heard from a church in Cleveland. They were having a meeting at that church. And it was a meeting to announce to people how they can save their houses that are being foreclosed on. Scratch another one. Those are vicious, wicked, terrifying problems that these people have. Where's my heart? Where's my heart on these things? When God begins to work down at this part, you know what we'll have? Will we have a religion of love? Now, when I go back over to Timothy, 2 Timothy chapter 2, which I forgot about, boy, am I glad that Lord reminds you. While we were having this meeting yesterday morning with these other guys, the subject turned to politics. So the question is, who you're going to vote for. I heard this one man begin to say a lot of things that weren't true about one of the candidates, but they were things he heard. If I can search my heart, in the church there is a terrible spirit of condemnation. I heard very little love about the candidates, whether they deserve it or not. When I start to read these two verses here, verse 25, in meekness instructing those that oppose themselves, that God peradventure will give them repentance to the acknowledging of the truth, and that they may recover themselves out of the snare of the devil, who are taken captive by him at his will. There is a tremendous captivity among believers this morning because of the spirit of condemnation. As a result of that, if I engage, for example, I told these guys, you know what? When we mention Hillary, what comes up with Hillary?
Where do you start?
All right. Right away, right away, what does the woman need?
Lord.
What?
God.
He's Christ. I mentioned, go ahead.
But Fred, just because you despise what people do and you see the evil that goes on, that's not this doesn't mean that that there's no love there. You can condemn somebody's actions. It doesn't mean you don't love them or in a godly way. I mean, I don't consider that necessarily the same. So anything negative that came out about her, and there's plenty of it, that's not me with a hateful heart towards her, although sometimes you probably can. There's a fine line. The things that you battle, but it doesn't necessarily mean.
See, it's a fine line. What should I be doing for Hillary?
Pray
Pray for her.
What?
Pray for her.
Praying what?
salvation.
Salvation. You know what? When those two came on, I want to tell you they're prime candidates for being what we like to do. And I did it. And I had to have the Lord check me. He says, look, you've talked about those people so much. Did you ever think about praying for them? It kind of struck me dumb. I never gave it a thought. You see. So I thought, okay, what do you want me to pray? I didn't even know what to pray. He said, why don't you ask me to save them? Oh, that's tough. Maybe I didn't think they deserved it. See, Obama, for example, we've been reading some interesting things about Obama. Isn't it fantastic? About his back. Are you learning anything, please?
Yeah.
Things you never even remotely knew about him, right? Obama was another guy. I've got to pray. He says, what does it mean when it says pray for your enemies? Now, for example, if I get in the Christian right, I get in people like mine. This is not a political thing. I have to go over here. Where does God want my heart? You see, when I look at the monsters that exist, where this country, I listened to that church full of people last night as they were announcing from there what these people could be doing to save their houses. You know what? Their monster this morning when they got up, as they look at each other, is full of fear. They're looking at money. Not that we shouldn't. These people are afraid of the street.
Fred, I was watching one of those cop shows, where they show the police doing their duties and the people they have to deal with. And they had pulled over this black guy driving a car, and he was waiting for this girl who was a white girl, had tattoos all over her. The policeman started asking questions. What are you waiting here for? And he knew the girl, and he eventually searched the girl, and she had cocaine on her, and he took her back to the police department and handcuffed her to a ring on this thing, took her handcuffs off her hands, but one arm to the thing. And he's saying, what are you so upset for? He says, you've been arrested 100 times, and she's doing this. He says, when was the last time you slept? She said 3 days ago. I burst into tears. I said, oh God, forgive her and save her. The Lord said, there's not a human being on the face of the earth that loves that girl.
What are her monsters this morning?
But imagine not one person loves that girl.
You won't get this just in your normal course of reasoning. You can't get this. You see, when I talk to this boy, looking at him and his life is an absolute shambles because he's a sexual predator. I told him, I said, I wish I could put it in a glass so you could drink it. I will walk away from the table. I don't feel like you feel. I said, I wish you could drink this so you could feel like I feel. I said, are you afraid? He said, I'm afraid all the time. I said, what about medication? Oh yeah, he says, I'm under medication. That's to keep that dread figure down. I said, I want you to do there were certain things that we did to pray with him. Then I told him, if God has done something for you this morning, I want you to read the 32nd Psalm, call me and tell you what your response to it was. In order for this boy to get some peace, what I'm talking about, I can't teach him, I can't illustrate, I can't give him a seminar or give him a tape. What we're going through is what God says that he has to do, and I trust then that I'll be able to hear the results. You know that one about same situation. To take him through so that he can get some peace. Why? Do I care anything about this kid? In the natural, I could care nothing about him because he's a piece of garbage. Now, I listen to a Christian television station. Go to bed, I rolled the volume up. The pastor is on from 9 to 10:30. Here's what I hear him calling. Everybody that he talks about is a communist or a whore. See? In fact, he mentioned George Soros. I won't go into who George is, but he's a big money man, and he called him a You know what? Instantly the Lord said, I want you to begin praying for George. So George Soros is on my prayer list. Why? Because I heard that spirit of condemnation coming out of that man who calls himself a pastor, who absolutely shows no love. I wonder what people would have thought. He said, you know what, let's just all pray that God will save George Soros tonight. Whew. Would that have been a step? Then he moves over here and he starts talking about somebody like some of these Hollywood girls. They're all whores. No. This is Christian man. There's no question about this guy being born again. I think of somebody like Pat Robertson. He comes out and he is an advocate for a man that should be president. And I just finished another book called God's Harvest, and these two students are talking about, isn't it something to have two Republican candidates who represent 5 marriages? You know what? After reading that, Rudy's on my prayer list. You see. When I begin to hear this, how do we turn it? Because when we get to this thing with so many monsters floating around, what do you think John the Baptist thought when he's going to behead him and he sends Philip off? He says, go find out if you're the one we're looking for. God was going to deliver John, but when they came to Jesus and said, are you the one we're looking for? He says, you just go tell John what I'm doing. He didn't say anything sympathetic to John. He said, just go tell him what I'm doing. When I begin to get into the depth of this thing and what I'm up against, because the monsters are getting greater and greater, and they're going that way, when are we going to do the only weapon that we have? Somebody said, I said, well, do you go to prayer meetings? He says, not too often. I said, do you love Christ? I said, give me your impression, or give me, how would you define it? He says, well, God is love. I said, do you love Christ? He says, yes, I do. I said, what is prayer? Give me your definition of prayer. And they started to go about telling us what it was. No, here's what Jesus said. If you love me, do what I tell you. Oh, what does that mean? Prayer is, I only come to prayer because I love Christ. And frankly, we got an awful lot of people in the church that don't look like they love him very much. Not judgmental, I'm praying for them. You see.
Again, though, like that preacher, if he would have said, pray for these people, that's one thing. Maybe he was a little harsh. But to me, was he wrong? I mean, sometimes condemnation is telling the truth about somebody. They are what they are. I mean, if you see a prostitute on the street, what would you call her?
I always know what she can become.
What she can become, it's true. But you got to call her what she is, and then fix
And then,
it.
see, when I saw that girl on the television set, it broke my heart.
It does.
And all I wanted that little girl to know is that I love her, and Jesus loves her. But there's no way for me to communicate with her.
I mean, you can
I
still
have
pray
never-
for them. I see what you're saying. You pray for these people, but you got to
She had
start from the
cracks on
ground
her
of
head.
what they
Let me,
are.
let
and
me
then
say
pray
this.
for them.
This is
It's
no
truthful,
argument that can be won. You cannot win this. We could not dialogue this into a conclusion. Why? Because, for example, one of the problems that the world has with us, we have a religion without love, and yet we talk about it all the time. I'll tell you something. When Paris Hilton's name came up, what is she? She's a whore. No, she's not. She's somebody's little girl that I started praying that God would save her. I do believe apparently she did something in the church while she's in jail. Why? God got a hold of her, put her in jail, almost drove her crazy. But now I pray for her another way. When she comes out, she's not going to instantly make big changes. But I'm praying that God will do certain things now in her life to direct her so that her life can be of value. And so when she gets up and begins to speak, she can talk about Christ, what she could do. How many of you know who Johansson is, or Savannah Sampson? They're two porn queens. Joanna has a book out, something about her porn queen life.
Oh,
I'm sorry?
I know who you're talking about.
Okay?
Yeah.
She's a porn queen.
Turned actress.
She's a beautiful girl, but getting her background and what happened to this girl. You know what? I prayed for this girl ever since I came to grips with who she is and what she does. Why? Could we say that, sure, she doesn't have any more values? Do you? Part of your value system will be what you can do to move toward her to help her. Can't go. I don't know where she lives. She's beautiful. Then I get in her background. She was abused. Didn't have a mother or a father. You see, all of these things, I can begin to intercede. What would happen if that girl got converted? And she got up and began to speak. What would happen? When the enemy comes in like with a flood, the word flood always implies what Satan is doing. When you get to flood tide, whenever he comes in like a flood, God says, what I begin immediately to look for, when this is taking place, I begin to look for another standard. What's the other standard? Right here, broken hearts. Why does he need a broken heart? Because when he gets somebody who he can lift up as a standard, that person is not going to have walls that are all up to begin criticizing these people and engaging in conversation about their filth. He says, you know what they'll do? They will begin to go to prayer for that person. Tara Reid, Tracy Lords, Heidi Fleisch, you know who they are?
Yeah.
Pamela Anderson, Courtney Love. Courtney Love is one of the most bewildered women that lives on the face of the earth.
Britney Spears.
You know, now I question you, and I want to ask you to do this, but who would pray for her? Who's going to stand up for somebody that is on the public scene, that if they come to Christ, what happens? We don't need us people trying to do what these people could do and get huge audiences as we, with our hearts properly oriented, would pray these people into the kingdom. Now they get up, and there's not a greater story to be heard than somebody who was sleeping around with everything it could walk says, I'm white as snow.
No.
Somebody says, you know what? Becomes a credibility factor. Whew. That person's got credibility. I know what you were. What changed you? You see, we have to function in a realm of change because we're the only agency that can provide it, and I can't talk you into changing.
Are you saying that the first step is a searchable heart?
Yes.
Then before we get to the broken hearts, do we have to have something done within our hearts?
I believe.
And what do you think that would be?
If this thing is going to be broken, what are going to some of the monsters that you have to go through that God will cause you to overcome that will be huge monsters, mountains, for example, so that you begin, what kind of crisis do you have in your family? Because the crisis I have in my family is going to be exactly the crisis that's going to be almost universal in this country.
The reason I mention that is because I think of 2 Chronicles 7:14, and it's addressed to us. It's not addressed to the Britney Spears of the world or the Donald Trumps of the world. It's addressed to the Christians. And it says, if my people who are called by my name would do what? Humble themselves. First thing. That tells me we have a lot of pride that has to be dealt with. Because we look this way and we say, hey, I'm not as bad as her. I'm not as bad as him. We've got all these kinds of problems because of our pride. Because we just think about self. But that's not dealt with.
Okay, you're right on target.
It's not preached about.
I want to hold and I want to dovetail what you're saying. I'm going to read this again. In meekness, instructing those that oppose themselves. You take somebody like this Savannah or any of these people, they're in opposition. They know that's not right. They do not have the power to overcome it. Who can stand in the gap for them except an overcomer? If you are a person who is with no morals, you cannot pray for somebody to overcome anything. Why? Because you got the same problem. If you overcome your own biases, your own discrimination, all of those mountains that you face as you come down through this process, God says, you know what? I'm working with you to get you where I want you because you won't oppose yourself. For example, I sat and listened yesterday to wonderful guys and the believers, and the first thing they did is come out with the criticisms of all the people who are running for office. I don't dispute that. But as Christians, to bring out their warts is not going to do me any good. Why don't we just stop right now and pray for all of them? It would be a first step. Go ahead.
You mentioned the homes. The first ones you started with were the homes. People don't like each other. Okay?
That's right, right here.
If you pick any congregation, any town USA, and people were honest, and they went around the room, how many people would say, tell you the truth, I really don't care for my husband, I really don't care for my wife. I really have a problem with my husband, I really have a problem with my wife.
And you know what? I
Really?
don't like my kids.
Okay, so what does that tell us? That tells us that the problem isn't me, the problem is you. If you would only straighten up, things would be so much different in our marriage and in our home, right? That tells me that we have a problem with pride.
Religion, but we have religion
Just
without
my
love,
opinion.
because
Right,
unless I begin to deal with my heart, which I can't tell anybody else
Right.
about their heart, when you begin to tell me all the problems you have about him, it's a spirit of condemnation. Don't tell me it isn't. You're laying it all on the other guy.
Right.
And now we hear all these politicians lay it on everybody else as if they're exonerated from ever making a mistake. But follow this, please. In meekness opposing them that oppose themselves. Now, when I think about the opposition that takes place in the heart of a believer, go over to 2 Corinthians chapter 1.
There's a comment, there's a new television show coming on, I guess where they hook you up to a lie detector.
Yeah, I saw
I've been seeing advertisements for it, and they ask people questions then, and they have to respond. I guess they get pretty pointed from just the previews they're showing. And so I'm talking to Kelly about that last night. Why would somebody want to do that? And again, it's just, I don't know if it's just notoriety, or I'm guessing there's probably some kind of prize that comes with this for money. But to debase yourself in front of America, and that's what we're doing. I'm sure it'll be a probably real popular, big hit show too.
Let me ask you, how many people, how many of you, please, I don't want an answer, how many of you have been in a room where somebody walks in, Christian or otherwise, and instantly there's already an attitude that you have that you really don't care for that person? I don't, no. No.
Sorry, Bill.
When I walked into this room, I felt that way.
Okay, there isn't
No
a
hard
single,
feelings, Mike.
now, in order when the Word of God talks about great tribulation, I believe that we're headed for these mountains and these monsters and this tribulation period like you wouldn't believe. And the only people that will be able to be comforting in this period of time that's coming, and it's coming like a locomotive with no brakes. Yesterday, for example, I went over here on West Market. Bombay is closing. I went to Sofa Express. It's closing. I went to Comp USA. It's closing. Start going in the mall. Closing store. Go over and look at Rolling Acres. Yeah. Listen to the number. How many? Reading the paper. How many businesses were closing down? Little Tykes. It's up for sale. People look at that and say, "You better get." These are the monsters. These are the fierce monsters that have no mercy. And so when you and I are dealing with him, if we enter into a time of great tribulation, God always needs great comforters. He doesn't deal with sympathy. He deals with people who have become, and through the afflictions they've gone through, there are 4 stages to go through that, but we don't have time to get. As I go through those 4 stages, he begins to make me a comforter, not a sympathizer. And the spirit that he will put on you is a spirit of consolation. Please read. Verse 4, 2 Corinthians, chapter 1. Who comforteth us in all our tribulations. There's that word. That we may be able to comfort them, listen to this one, please, which are in trouble, by the comfort wherewith we ourselves are comforted of God. For as the suffering of Christ abound in us, so our consolation, there's that word, also aboundeth by Christ. And whether we be afflicted, it is for your consolation. See that your afflictions are for somebody else's consolation. And salvation, which is effectual in the enduring of the same sufferings which we also suffer, or whether we be comforted, it is for your consolation and your salvation. And our hope of you is steadfast, knowing that as you are partakers of the suffering, please note, so shall ye be partakers of consolation. God says, the only place that people can find anything that will make any sense through them is the consolation that God brings through you. They won't get it by going to some upgrade this and upgrade their psychology or taking pills. God's whole program in the Great Tribulation is to have people are great comforters and they can bring a spirit of consolation. Or I can go to somebody and say, you know, if you hadn't done that, that wouldn't have happened. That brings a spirit of condemnation. I want to tell you, I asked the Lord to search my heart. I want you to know I'm not without saying, Lord, I need some help with that person, because I want you to know, first I'm going to confess, I don't love them. There were 2 degrees of that. One is, I don't love them. Secondly is, there's a sense of estrangement, and that simply means my love has gotten cold. I have something, I had to turn the heat up on it. I said, Lord, my love is cold right now. Turn it up. In fact, you know what? I don't even want to ask you because of my human nature. My human nature is my own ball and chain. I don't really want to do it. I think they get what they deserve. God says, you know what? Got to cut that shackle, get that monster off, because their monsters are bigger than your monsters. Mine is, I end up not caring. The minute you don't care, you just contribute to everybody's problem, and you'll go out in the church and you'll be part of the problem, not part of the solution. See, I have to keep going back here. If I don't do this, I'm so self-centered, I won't know my own heart. And neither do you, just because of what you're saying. I always think more highly of myself. Then what happens when the Lord brings something along, he says, you're not praying for your husband, all you do is condemn him. Right. Why? What do you mean I condemn him? All you ever do is talk about what he doesn't do. You know what? He says you're a murmurer and a complainer, and the worst thing before God is a murmurer and complainer that keeps belly aching. He says God hates murmurers and complainers. You know what? Look at what we have. We're praying this morning about the people leaving their warm houses to come to church. Like, good Lord, we don't want to put that burden on them on such a cold day. Shame on us. You ought to come here with your heater off. I have mine on.
But you know what? They'll be packed out to watch Green Bay beat New York
70,000.
Giants, 0-degree temperature.
That's
They'll be packed out.
And not only that, you won't be able to see
You're-
much of the
you're
stadium because of steam
condemning.
coming out of their breath. Yeah, Janet.
One comment to what you said earlier, Nancy, is that, you know, you can hate sin but still love the sinner.
That's what I'm trying to say. I
Right.
wasn't saying,
And that's, you know, I think that's where you have to look
Yes.
at it. Because people's behavior, you can hate behaviors, but you still love the sinner.
that's what I was trying
Right.
to say.
But then it does say in Psalm 15 that who may dwell in your sanctuary, who may live on your holy hill. He whose walk is blameless and who does what is righteous, who speaks the truth from his heart and has no slander on his tongue, who does his neighbor no wrong and casts no slur on his fellow man. But then the next thing it says is, who despises a vile man but honors those who fear the Lord. And so you despise the sin of the
what I'm
vile
saying.
man, but you love them.
That's what I was trying to
But
say.
most people don't love, is what Fred is trying to say. He's
I
saying
guess
that
we're
really
talking
there's
about
a
the
spirit of condemnation, and they're so wrapped up in their behaviors that they don't see the heart or the person.
Okay. See, that's what I was trying to say. I don't want to come across harsh or anything, but sometimes it also says, you know, if you see someone, it doesn't mean you don't care about them if you call them to the carpet on their actions. And sometimes you have to be brutally honest with that person. Not that you're any better or you're condoning that but you can't just sweep it on the rug and say, I don't want to hear what you did, because sometimes people need to confess that, invent that, and then you could be a comforter too. You see what I'm saying? I'm just saying you can't just say, oh, I don't want to hear what he did. You know, he can beat you or cheat on you. Don't talk. I'm not interested. I'm just interested in just praying for you. You gotta let that person get it out
You know what?
too. You gotta present the ugliness before you can fix it. Sometimes, don't you?
I'm going to keep that
See
open.
what I'm saying?
The problem with monsters is they're either too big or they're too vicious.
Yeah.
For example, all those people who are looking at holiness have to have both of them. Too big and vicious. Those people won't have any peace day or night. You know what? I'll tell you what's going to be on their mind. What's going to happen to who?
Me.
Right.
This isn't something that you project like we would getting up and going to work tomorrow. These people are thinking one thing this minute, what's going to happen to me? And then they look at their kids, what's going to happen to them? Who's going to solve this problem? The government? The government's broke. And all of these people are looking at these giveaways. When God begins to move, just watch the newspapers. You don't need to turn the pages. You just read the front page and see that people are going out of business and losing their jobs. It's God that giveth thee power to get wealth. It's the Lord that maketh rich, doesn't add any sorrow with it. He doesn't add divorce and broken homes and sexual businesses and all that. He blesses it with people who have money. problem with people that when he gives them money, they corrupt the money and they corrupt themselves. Then what do they have? They go back and they bring the monsters into the living room. They bring them into the bedroom. They bring them into the children. The monsters are all invited in, and boy, they never have any problems with wanting to come in. However, if you have not been involved with this, if you've gone through this process, that you begin to sense that you're not going to oppose these things. I hear opposition when I said, we're talking about the Christian right and the conservative movement. I'm not talking about that. You see, we've gotten all bogged down in the Christian right and the conservative movement. I am conservative, but first of all, I'm a Christian. And instead of listing all of these people and their shortcomings and their failures, God says, quit doing it. You know why? Anytime you criticize somebody, you're murmuring and complaining. All you have to do is listen to some, and they start murmuring and complaining about something. God says it's not true. So what do we have? We align ourselves with a group. My thinking is, and what we're talking about, come here to on a Wednesday night prayer meeting. Somebody says you're getting personal. Number one, I've got to confess I don't like to pray. Well, if I confess something, that's kind of like being against motherhood. Well, maybe it is. Maybe you don't like your mother, but anyway, you can confess that too. God says, if I go back to what he meant, how he manifests himself, he says, I will manifest myself if you simply do what I tell you. He tells us to what? Pray. But prayer becomes like motherhood. Broad subject, everybody agrees on. I'll attach something to it. I pray because I love Christ. That's why I pray. Why would I pray if I didn't love him? He says, if you do that, you're doing what I'm asking you to do. He says, if you do what I ask him to do, I'm going to come and manifest myself through you. All right? Where should we start? He says, stop complaining about the political parties and Nancy Pelosi. He says, I love her. I says, you got to be kidding me. All these people have eternal souls, and the only reason we're fighting these monsters today is because of the church. If the church gets far enough along and people release what they have so they don't complain about what they fear they're going to lose, God brings them into freedom, and now they're free, they're unencumbered, they can pray.
Before we get to those people, though, don't you feel that we need to be concerned with the home front? The reason I mention that is because there are more divorces in the church than outside the church, which tells me that there's a real problem within the church.
Okay.
And if that be true, then what is the problem? The problem is you don't measure up to what I want. You're not what you ought to be. I am, but you're not. Okay?
Well, we want you to be truthful.
And so as a result, all right, we start to drift apart. Slow but sure. And our love grows cold, waxes cold. And after a period of time we say, I don't love you anymore.
Let me tell you, the only reason...
How does that happen?
You talk about a church being dead, there's only one reason a church dies. That's because the people refuse to change. Pastor refuses to change, and what he becomes, he simply becomes a homesteader. He ministers to those people in that church, and they accept it. Nobody comes, nobody goes, nothing's done, and they don't realize that they have died spiritually. Because he that hath my commandments and keepeth them, okay? He it is that loves me, and he that loves me shall be loved of my Father. Listen to what he says. I will love him. I will manifest myself to him. What counts me to be worthy? You got to love him more than you love your family. Second thing is, you simply have to do what he tells you. What does he do? We have 9/11. The churches are packed. He sends a message. Boom. Churches are packed. Why? It's in hieroglyphics. I remember seeing all the senators and congressmen and presidents sitting in a big cathedral, and the preachers preaching to them, and they all looking very somber. Where were they 2 weeks later? The next time God gets our attention, we'll pack the churches again. Now, two things happened. Number one, the people came to the church as a result of 9/11. Number two, they were disillusioned and didn't get what they thought they might get, so they didn't come back. Number three, where's the great comforters going to come from? It won't come from the institutional church. It has to come from the believers who carry the spirit of consolation. If you don't carry the spirit of consolation, you're never going to comfort anybody. Somebody says, how do I get the spirit of consolation? God says, you know what? I'm going to give you the spirit of empathy. That means when you see this little girl who's shackled and you weep for her, you are now beginning to display something of what I'm talking about.
And you know what? I agree with all that. I really do. But I think it starts at home first.
What?
I think it starts at home first. And I think that's why we have so many marriages in great difficulty.
Bill?
Because we don't console one another at home.
It starts with me.
Right.
So
It
how's
starts
it going to
with
work
me.
outside?
Here's the question. Here's the family. Let me ask you this. Of all the players, now I'm talking specifically intimate players that have come and gone through that house. Do you love every one of them? Warts and all. In your house, for example, let's go to your mothers and your fathers and those people that have come through that household. And they've married. You've got brothers and sisters. Do you love everybody in that house? Because he says if you don't, and that circle, you can't get to this one, you'll never get to that one. We got all kinds of families today that just don't love each other.
Right. Exactly.
Now, if this is my family, do I lack a spirit of love toward any one of those family members? Past, present, or future? If they're passed away, that's beside the point. God says, I put some monsters in your house. You see, I've gone through with that person. Rightly so. Are they the hippo or the crocodile?
Both.
You know, as a lawyer, I always have to pose a question. And I'm not talking about our church, but I think one of the biggest lies that are ever told is, well, I don't like what they do, but I love them. And then that lawyer comes out at me and says, okay, show me the evidence that you love them.
Well, let's go back to the lawyer. In everybody's heart, there's a lawyer. And that lawyer in you springs to the service to defend you at every opportunity.
Right.
And until you can have him kill that lawyer with the mediator between God and man, the advocate with the Father, Jesus Christ, the righteous, you can't win the battle.
What are you talking about, killing lawyers?
Yeah.
I'm not talking about. I'm
I told
talking
her
about.
this morning, I said it's the lawyers in our life that are causing them.
So the judge can
all your
appoint Jesus
fault,
to be your ultimate lawyer.
All I have to do is take a survey and see how the love factor is toward the individuals that are in my family. That's the first one. Then the second inventory I can take is, how does that love apply to Christ? I confess to you that when I read, if you don't love these more than me, you are not worthy. I said, Lord, I want to be worthy. Check me out. Help me out. I can't answer that for anybody. The only thing I can do is, the more I get his mind, the more I'll participate in the things that he says. If you love me, do what I tell you. I do what he tells me, and you know what? He begins to manifest himself. And please recognize that God will give you a spirit of consolation instead of condemnation.
Amen.
When you can sense that empathy with somebody rather than that criticism of that person, God says, you know what? You're getting on the same page with me. So finish this up.